Buenos dias. Welcome. I just want to ask you to take a moment to think, to remember when in your lives and where did you first develop a connection to nature, an attraction to nature, perhaps a love of nature. When did that happen in your life? I'm aware that Venezuela is a country very rich in biodiversity and beauty, and I'm sure many of you have tasted of that. This is upstate New York, the Adirondack Park, which is a 6 million acre park. And this is where it happened for me when I was about 8 years old. It's really the reason why I do what I do today. And it's a reminder that the more that we cultivate in our children a love of nature, the better the chance that they will grow up to love it and want to protect it. I like to say my family business is education. My mother was a voice teacher. She's still alive, but she's not. She was a voice teacher, an Alexander teacher. My father was a headmaster of 2 schools, a principal. My uncle, professor of classics. My older brother teaches U.S. history. My first job out of university was as a teacher as well. And in a way, I'm certainly still in education today. I found myself in the late 1990s, in Washington, D.C., looking for a job with an environmental nonprofit. And I found an organization that happened to be at the cutting edge of this new idea, which was sustainable development and bringing it into education. So that's what I ended up doing, and spent a number of years working with the Association of University Leaders for a Sustainable Future, and helping to integrate sustainability into university life. And then I moved, because that's where my heart sort of took me, I moved back toward primary and secondary education. And now I sort of work in all 3 areas, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So I don't know what that says, but I translated. No, I have a clue. We realized a few weeks ago, you know what? Let's take my English. Let's have someone with a lot of expertise translate my English, and obviously you should be looking at Spanish slides, not English slides. So we'll do a little bit of context. Talk a little bit about what is sustainable development, what is education for sustainable development, and then I'm going to give some examples really from a U.S. perspective. This is really to give you ideas to stimulate conversation, and I hope that it's useful and helpful to you. I will focus mostly on primary and secondary education, a reference at the end to universities, but on Friday I'm going to be giving a talk more focused on sustainability in higher education. So that's how I thought I would do it. So geologists today and many scientists are really beginning to see our era, as the era of the Anthropocene, the age of man. We have now, our fingertips have reached every single corner of the planet, often for worse. And so we are really at a sort of a shift. And the sooner we realize this, fundamentally, the sooner we will begin to take the full responsibility that we need to take for our power. Some of the big concerns that we face, I'm sure you're familiar with these. A different kind of problem that we face, boredom. There's a huge amount of boredom and feeling of disconnection among students all around the world, more than there should be. And it's something to be thinking about, and it certainly speaks to the need for some thinking about how we educate and why. This may be more of a northern western problem, but all educators, maybe every year we should sort of re-ask this question of ourselves. Schools should always have this question foremost in mind. And I'm not going to have too many more of these wordy slides, I'm sorry. But just to get to the sort of the meat of it, I think of education for sustainability or sustainable development as having these two dimensions: practice, content. And what does that mean? These are some of the, this is what we mean by the practice, and it's a dimension of it fits very nicely into education, because schools, universities, and colleges can model responsible behavior. And by the way, there have been, you can imagine, many have worked on defining what the content of sustainability in education is, and this is one that I like. There are others. They're all very much related. And importantly, to add to that is the notion of interconnectedness, sometimes referred to as systems thinking. No great problem can be solved by looking at any one system by itself, right? Climate change is a social issue, an economic issue, an environmental issue. Poverty, social issue, environmental issue, economic issue, and so forth. Some examples. And I've tried to just put together sort of a collage of some images. I'm really giving you a sense of what does this look like in the US where I work, where I spend most of my time working with schools, colleges, universities. A suburban school, Princeton Day School. That wasn't supposed to happen. That has a little, okay, timer on it. That woman, Liz Cutler, she's sort of the sustainability director, champion at Princeton Day School. The schools that are succeeding in making this great integration have someone who is designated to do that work. And she's that person. She also teaches English. But it's very important. Clearly, we've seen it over and over again. Any school that doesn't have someone with that responsibility, with that title, isn't going to get a lot done. And it occurred to her in 2008, because this has been kind of a growing interest in the US, an interest in food and in gardens, and connecting them with education. It occurred to her, let's just start a garden. She's a determined person. There was a field across the street from the school. She invited the community in, and they began to work, and they created a garden. At first, the teachers didn't know what to do with it, and within a year, most teachers were making use of the garden as a place to teach, especially, of course, the primary school teachers, to bring the kids into that world and to work with the soil, to grow things. The chef in the dining hall at first wasn't that interested. Now he loves the garden, and he's there every day during growing season, and serves as much of this food in his dining room as he can. An alumnus of the school got excited, provided money to build an outdoor classroom, which is used now quite extensively. And this is a favorite of mine. This is the Monarch Butterfly Project, which is sort of part of the garden, and monarch-friendly flowers are grown in the garden for this reason. The students, these are 5th graders, and they basically grow a butterfly. They take care of it, they let it go, they tag it, and they're in touch with 2 universities in the US to what's going on with the fungus that seems to be killing off many monarchs, and to see if they can, again, contribute to the research on the monarch issue. There's a cutting kitchen. The students are participating in actually the food preparation within the school, all because of this garden. So the garden at this school has kind of become a centerpiece for thinking about sustainability, and is really having some profound effects on the school. Okay, urban school, town school. A very different environment, New York City. Again, just some examples. Students participated in a rally, a Ban the Bag rally in New York City. Many communities now in the US are trying to get rid of the plastic bag, the ubiquitous plastic grocery bag that is causing problems everywhere in the ocean. Some people have actually blamed the plastic bag for some of the flooding that occurred, during Hurricane Sandy, because the bags were plugging the drains in certain parts of the city and in certain towns in that area, sort of the northern New Jersey coast and in New York City. The students of town school have been participating in cleaning up areas that were devastated, and where actually their playing fields are located in this case. Mulch Festival. The kids every year drag kind of Christmas trees that are put on the streets to a certain area. I think this day, they dragged a couple of hundred of them in the section around the school in New York City to be mulched, composted for the city parks and gardens. So this is the sustainability director of town school being arrested. A good teaching moment for his students. He was protesting the building of it's a transfer station essentially within the city that was this is a transfer station for garbage and trash that is turning out to be very controversial. He told me, one thing I learned: don't wear shorts before you go to jail. You don't want to wear shorts in jail. Not comfortable, I guess. Palmer Trinity, Florida. A sort of suburban school. I mean, it is within Miami, the limits of Miami. Here I'm really focusing on student action. So this school happens to have just a very, very active student club, an eco club, we call them. And these students are participating. They have a relationship with the Miami Museum, and this is an ongoing mangrove reclamation project. And the students have led this, and it's one of these examples of you have a combination of a very strong teacher who is their coordinator, who's sort of their, what would be the word? Their guide, and holds very high standards. The president of the student of this eco club has to attend the probably one of the best student leadership conferences in the US that occurs every June, sort of an environmental leadership conference for students. And so these kids really get stuff done. This is the mangrove project has sort of spread throughout the school. So every student at the school nurtures one seedling starting in the fall, and then plants it in the spring. And it's kind of an eco-art project as well. These are just the walls of the school. And this is a typical example. Again, I'm really just trying to give you a sense of what this looks like in the US, which is where my focus mostly is. But this student club does a combination of, helping people save energy. They put up signs, they do funny things, and they do all sorts of things to get people to change their behaviors on a daily basis. They researched and ordered these containers for trash and recycling, and they also compost their food waste at this school. And on the subject of food, these are just two remarkable students at Hotchkiss School in Connecticut who started what is called the Real Food Challenge. When I say started, they started the Real Food Challenge at Hotchkiss. The Real Food Challenge is an independent organization, mostly working with colleges and universities, but any schools can join it. This is in the U.S., of course. I don't know if it's international, but it may well be. But it is incumbent on the students. The students must initiate this connection with the organization, and they analyze all of the food that comes into the school. They look at its source. They look at its quality. They look at how far it comes from. And every food item, ultimately, the goal has to meet one of those 4 criteria or more. Ecologically sound, local, humane, or fair, as in fair trade. Just a map that they put up showing where these different items come from. Again, on curriculum, a course, a favorite course of mine. This is a 1-week course taught in a middle school at a school in Connecticut. And the objective here is to build a sustainable city. The kids are given a week to engage in this exercise, and it is one of these transforming experiences. It's probably the one course these kids remember 10 years, 20 years later, which is a real clue to the power of what we call experiential education, which is a fundamental to sustainability education. These kids build a model. They go out into the community, in this case, New Haven, Connecticut, which is a city with all kinds of challenges and strengths and weaknesses. It's really a great place, actually a great laboratory for them to work. Sorry. Okay. Groups of students are assigned to these different areas, and they, as I say, meet with professionals, government people, alumni who happen to be experts in different fields. They're staying up late at night. Their parents are exhausted by the end of the week, but these kids are sort of on fire, and then this is sort of the result. And they've been doing this for some years, and it's just been a tremendous success. Just to me, a nice example of what a creative school or teachers can do. Another kind of course. This is actually more of a full-length course. It's actually part of a course. I've always wondered why, in traditional education, we don't teach about food. We don't teach food systems. It's extraordinary to me because we all interact with food every day, and yet our children, many of us, don't know a lot about it. We don't know a lot about where it comes from, et cetera. And it's just one of those funny things. Well, how do we miss that? I don't know if you are familiar with these photographs. A photographer went around the world actually some years ago taking photographs in different communities with a family and 1 week of food. This one I particularly like. Look at the abundance and the healthiness of that food, and then, oof, look at that one. Oh my God. There is a little broccoli over there on the right. So there's one of the big problems right there in the U.S. I mean, I know that we all, unfortunately, many countries struggle with packaged food, junk food, fast food. I'm going to touch really briefly on higher ed. Higher education really has been a leader in the sustainability movement, certainly in the US, and I think it's true in many countries. This is a great example of something that happened. This was introduced, the commitment, the climate change commitment was introduced in 2007, and nearly 700 of our 4,000 higher ed institutions have signed it. When you sign it, you commit to, number one, climate neutrality by a certain date. Climate neutrality means that the university, in this case, produces no greenhouse gases. Now, we don't really know what that means yet. We're sort of, it's a rolling definition. But this is forcing us to really figure out, how do we get to climate neutrality when we are so dependent and so in love with fossil fuels? Somehow we need to do it. But that's an impressive number. And the other part of signing this thing is that you will educate your students about climate change and about sustainability. So it has these two pieces, which is really, really great. Some headlines. These are just examples of the hundreds of programs that have started up at universities around the US that have to do with sustainability thinking, learning, skills, values. And it's not just, Harvard and MIT are now really engaging as well. I mean, in some ways it's taken the more famous and the more traditional schools longer to get on board, but they are really getting on board now. And Yale, and Princeton. So that's very promising. And two examples of just some initiatives that have occurred for the school sector. This is the primary and secondary school sector. U.S. Department of Education introduced green ribbon schools about 3 or 4 years ago. So every year, about 80 schools in the U.S. are awarded the green ribbon. And it has 3 requirements: environmental education, responsible use of resources, which we've sort of touched on, and health and wellness, which is a really interesting thing. That's become a topic in the U.S. that it's grabbed hold within the education sector. That we need to be thinking about the health and wellness of our students. The buildings that they're learning in, are those buildings well ventilated? Or is the CO2 building up so that they get tired because there isn't enough circulation of air? Are they non-toxic? Very fundamental stuff, but critically important. Exercise, healthy food, healthy eating. This is part of the wellness, and again, it fits very nicely, I think, with this notion of sustainability education. And eco-schools, which now, there are eco-schools from 59 different countries around the world now. Thousands and thousands of schools have joined the eco-schools network. I'm giving you two examples of initiatives. This is international. No schools in Venezuela are part of this yet. And my last slide, actually. What are some of the benefits that come from education for sustainability? Research has shown that this is the case. And to me, again, I mentioned experiential education. I think what probably is most exciting is the passion for learning, because students are focused on real-world problem solving. So the boredom goes away. And the engagement with others, with the community. It's active learning, not passive, not sitting behind a desk. Of course, that has to happen too. And really the question is, how do we integrate sustainability thinking, values, skills into education? We're not going to throw out the old stuff, but we do need to update it. I mean, there are a lot of schools in the US that are teaching the same stuff, basically they've been teaching since 1850. The same courses, the same disciplines, all disconnected, siloed, not interconnected, which of course life is. Life is interconnected. It's not separate disciplines. So it's about reorienting and rethinking and adding some new ideas and ways of thinking and skills. Before I finish, I just want to say one thing, which is that I really come to you out of humility for two reasons. One, the US is struggling with a lot of things, and I'm here to be very honest and open about our tremendous struggles with poverty. We had a report come out 2 months ago that over 50% of our school children are at the poverty level, as defined in the US, are from low-income families. That's an incredible number, given that we have so much wealth. There is absolutely no excuse for that. We are we have to take huge responsibility for climate change and face that head on. We are an over-consuming nation. That's outrageous. And we have a growing, right now we're in a historical phase of a growing gap between rich and poor. I think that pendulum is going to swing back. I think people are finally waking up to that. We have our problems. So we need this as much as anybody. The second thing is, my second point is, there is no one way to make this transformation in education, and every country and every school has to figure this out. What I love about working with schools is that every one of them is different, has a different history, a different ethos, a different mindset, and so it's always a new kind of problem, a challenge. So I'm not here to tell you how to do it, but I'm really grateful to be here, to be part of this conversation for the next week. Thank you very much. Gracias.